What's going on, everyone? Bran here from Bloody Breakdown, welcoming you all back. This time, we're going to be doing the 1990s, the best horror films of 1990. So last time we did the 80s, that was a really long video. I don't think this one's going to be quite as long as that one was. I think I have a few less films on this list, but neither here nor there. We got to get into it, folks. So this one is set up, obviously, for people who are looking for something for the holidays. I call it the holiday season, spooky season, Halloween season. You want to watch some good horror films. Maybe you've never seen them. Maybe they'd be cool to revisit, whatever, what have you. This is my pick for the best horror of 1990s. And we're going to go through year by year, 1990 to 1999, give you my favorite film of each year and some honorable mentions to check out as well. So, like I said, the last one took for fucking ever to get through. So I'm going to learn from that mistake, and we're going to go ahead and start things off with some honorable mentions for 1990. So first and foremost, we're talking Child's Play 2. This one, I really wish, because in my last video in the 80s, I was able to put the original Child's Play as my favorite movie of 1988. Unfortunately, for 1990, as much as I love Child's Play 2, even more than the original, I can't put it at number one. You'll see why here momentarily, but I felt like it's definitely one that should be an honorable mention. If for some reason you haven't caught this Child's Play film, this is the one to see. I mentioned in the 80s video about, certain movies within a franchise really encapsulating that franchise. I kind of feel like this does that. So yeah, definitely worth an honorable mention. Let's see a couple of more honorable mentions before we find out my pick for best horror film of 1990. And Misery. This is one that I got to be real with you. Yet another Stephen King adaptation. Kathy Bates probably gives, in my opinion, the best performance of her entire career. Love this one. Really interesting. I think most people have probably seen this, but if in the event you haven't, this is one that you definitely shouldn't have missed. So go check it out. I feel it definitely deserves an honorable mention for 1990. And our final honorable mention for this year of 1990 would be a TV movie that aired in two parts because of the length of the story. As you saw how they had to do it in the quote-unquote remakes they did years back. But that would be Stephen King's It. This would be the original, directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, who also directed Halloween 3. So yeah, this one's really good. I've always felt like I kind of bounce back and forth. I kind of feel like I enjoy this iteration's childhood version, part 1, and the newer iterations, part 2. But I gotta say, either way, this one's just very well done, even for a TV film. Tim Curry's amazing as Pennywise. And, if you're a big fan of the new It films, but you've never checked out the old made-for-TV one here, it's a long watch, just like watching It Chapters 1 and 2 would be, but it's definitely worth it. Go check it out. I remember when I first bought this film, it was on 2 VHSs, so that'll give you an idea. Strap in, but it's well worth it. So here we are, folks. This is my pick for the horror film of 1990. Absolutely love this one. The Exorcist, we all know, is a classic. The sequel, not so good. But this one, The Exorcist 3, fan-fucking-tastic. Brad Dourif does an amazing job in this film. The story is just chef's kiss. And I got to say, this movie contains one of the best jump scares in the history of horror. And it actually pays off. It's not just a jump scare for the fuck of it. Very well done. You may have even seen that jump scare used in memes or videos or things, but even if you have, I guarantee you, it'll still get you every single time. My pick, best horror film of 1990, The Exorcist 3. Now let's move on to some honorable mentions for 1991. Of course, we got to talk about Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs. This movie has a lot of social commentary in it. A lot of people miss it. I don't know how the fuck they miss it. People like the quartering, pine for the days of The People Under the Stairs when there was no social commentary in your horror. It's like, dude, you're kind of a fucking idiot because it's right in your face. But I'll let you all kind of make those determinations on your own. Very strange, but very entertaining, and I think well done horror film. It's Wes Craven. Can't go wrong with that guy. So yeah, honorable mention for 1991, The People Under the Stairs. Another honorable mention has to go to Child's Play 3. I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like this one, but I absolutely adore the original trilogy. The Child's Play films, as I call them. They've never gone back to calling them Child's Play since Child's Play 3. But I thought this one was well done. I think it was a good ending to the original trilogy. And yeah, maybe it doesn't quite live up to Child's Play 1 or 2, but I think it's a really good one, especially for this time of the year, and deserving of an honorable mention. But ladies and gents, here it is. In case you didn't know, my pick, best horror film of 1991, has to go to The Silence of the Lambs. The goddamn thing won an Academy Award, for fuck's sake. You know, stuff horror never touches. And even though they tried to repurpose this and repackage it and try to spin it as if it isn't a horror film, at the end of the day, this movie is about a man who eats people and a man who skins women alive. And if that's not a horror film, I don't know what the hell is. Ladies and gentlemen, this was I can't say it's the beginning of the Hannibal Lecter franchise, as Manhunter had came out previously. But this is the introduction of Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, Jodie Foster, obviously. An amazing film. I don't care if you like horror or not. This one's good, and it transcended through the genres. Enough so to win an Academy Award. So bravo to this film for doing what very few horror films have ever done. It's my pick for the best horror film of 1991. And if you haven't seen this one, I'm sure by the end of it, you'll be dancing around to Goodbye Horses and asking yourself in the mirror if you'd fuck you for days and weeks to come. Fantastic stuff. Let's move on to 1992, folks. And here's an honorable mention, Army of Darkness. This, a.k.a. Evil Dead 3. The campiness goes up even a notch, taking Ash back to the medieval times, so to speak. Just a overall fun movie. It's got some really cool gore in it. It's got some really funny moments. And it's just overall just a really good time. I like it. So moving on here to another honorable mention for 1992. I know a lot of people hate this movie. I like it. I tend to like a lot of Edward Furlong's work from this time, like Brain Scan, this film, T2. Really enjoy a lot of his stuff. Now, does this live up to the original Pet Sematary? No, not at all. But in the same vein as Army of Darkness, I think it's a good time. And it's something that I do revisit from time to time, especially around the Halloween season. So definitely, if you haven't already, you're not looking for a great film, just a good time, check out Pet Sematary 2. And that will bring me to my personal pick for movie of the year in 1992, that being Candyman. And this movie's fantastic, folks. It really is. Candyman has kind of found himself, Daniel Robitaille, in that upper echelon of horror, specifically slasher icons, and with good purpose, too. This is another Clive Barker adaptation, and just a really good movie. Another movie that has some social commentary behind it. Very well done. And it's just, you look at 1992, and I don't think it's a year that's really necessarily lacking, but this film definitely stands out amongst the rest. The same way, in my opinion, Silence of the Lambs does the year previous. So, we just got a new Candyman sequel this year. So definitely check that one out if you haven't already, and check this one out because that new one is a direct sequel to the original, kind of ignoring the events of 2 and 3, which, hey, I am 100% okay with. But there it is, my pick, best horror movie of 1992, The Candyman. So let's check out some honorable mentions for 1993. You guys hate me, don't you? You hate me. You hate me. Let me let me mention something about 1993. So in my last video, I mentioned how 1983 was kind of a weak year for horror, and I ended up giving you guys Psycho 2, Sleepaway Camp, and Cujo in that year. 93 is a lot. It leaves a lot to be desired. Let's just say that 1993 was not the best year for horror. So much so that I struggled to come up with one honorable mention and the best movie. Here's my honorable mention, folks. And I'll say this. I'm not a huge fan of Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, but I don't shit on it the way most people do. I think it was interesting to try to do something different with the franchise after 8 films that were in essence the same thing, just maybe slightly tweaked here and there. This movie gives you something completely different. It's off the rails. It's one of the craziest Jason films you'll ever see. If you haven't seen it, I gotta say, it's nothing like any other Friday the 13th film you'll ever see. Now, that may be a good thing, that may be a bad thing. I'll let you decide. But it's my honorable mention, and that's got to be saying something. This was kind of a lackluster year. I defend Jason Goes to Hell, but when I put it into an honorable mention for the best of 93, 93 was kind of lacking. So that's my only honorable mention for this year. So with that said, best movie in 1993 for the horror genre, my opinion, Leprechaun. And once again, this isn't a fantastic movie. It's definitely better than, in my opinion, pretty much everything that followed it. Warwick does a good job as Leprechaun in this film, as he always does. You've got Jennifer Aniston in this thing. The acting, while isn't great, is better than some of the things that follow in this franchise. And it really just came down to what's a better film, in my opinion, Leprechaun or Jason Goes to Hell. And I think that Leprechaun comes out on top by just a smidge. So yeah, just to reiterate, everyone, this is just my opinions. If you have a movie from 93 that you think is really good and should have been on here, it's just my opinion. So the only thing I can go with are things that I've seen. And based on the movies that I had seen from 1993, it was lacking. So yeah, there's Leprechaun, folks. It's another interesting little film. I can't put it out there like it's really fantastic or anything. But in a lacking year, hey, why not? Check it out. Let's move on to 1994, folks, and check out some honorable mentions. I actually just mentioned this film earlier. Now, 1994 is another year that I felt like there wasn't a lot to really pick from, but I feel like the picks that I have are much better than 1993. So here's Brain Scan. This, like I said earlier, as I was mentioning, Edward Furlong, he's a part of this film. This one's really different. I feel like the antagonist, as you can see here on screen, is very menacing and different looking than a lot of the other horror or slasher villains from this era. The story itself is very different, just on the whole. And it's another one I don't want to say too much about because I feel like a lot of people probably haven't seen this one. But I would suggest it. Edward Furlong, as I said, kind of doing a video game virtual reality spin on horror. So yeah, check it out if you have it. Like I said, I don't hear many people talk about this one, and I think that they should be. So this is my honorable mention for 1994. And like I said, wasn't a lot to pick from this year, but I feel like the quality's better. So my pick for movie of the year in the horror genre of 1994, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Now, once again, I said earlier, I felt like it would be kind of rare for sequels to get the top spot, but this one definitely does it. In a year where there wasn't a lot to grab from, but really what there was really good. So it's, Wes Craven's New Nightmare kind of making the entire previous Freddy movies appear just as movies. This was feeling that whole meta thing 2 years before Wes Craven would do it with Scream. So it kind of seemed like this was a litmus test. And whereas this film did not perform as well as Scream did, I feel like this was definitely that litmus test for that self-aware modern or postmodern meta type thing with Scream. And I think it definitely laid the groundwork for it. And I feel like this movie doesn't get enough credit. I think it was very well done. It's Freddy without being Freddy. It's kind of a new whole deal on this franchise. And I think after Freddy's dead, it really needed something like that. So once again, Wes Craven, damn near impossible to go wrong with this guy. This movie was really interesting, really different, ahead of its time. and I thoroughly enjoy it. In my opinion, for my money, the best horror film of 1994. So, honorable mentions from 1995. Let's jump right in. We go from a Craven to a Carpenter. Can't get any better than that, right? So this is In the Mouth of Madness, starring Sam Neill. This is another one that's a real mind fuck, in my opinion. If you like that type of movie, I think you'll really enjoy this one. This is one that I feel like a lot of younger people these days probably have not seen, but they definitely should. The same way I did as a young man who was going back checking out horror films that came out before I was born. I would love to see a lot of young people do that. Go and check out the older films that kind of paved the way for what you're watching today, especially if you're a fan of the genre. So yeah, I feel like this one definitely deserves an honorable mention. It's a real mind fuck. It's been memed to death as well, so go check it out. Definitely deserves an honorable mention for 1995. This movie almost became my favorite of 1995. Growing up, my mom loved this movie. And by 95, I was about a year out from really becoming a horror fan. But I do remember watching this movie. And whereas it's not 100% horror, it's definitely got your thriller elements. This movie puts me in mind of Silence of the Lambs a good bit. But of course, as you can see here, you've got Sigourney Weaver, you've got Holly Hunter. I forget the other guy's name who plays one of the antagonists. He plays piano and things of that nature, but I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. Harry Connick Jr. There you go. But he does a fantastic job playing as a quasi Hannibal Lecter role in this film. Because I said this movie is pretty. I think it owes a lot to Silence of the Lambs, but at the same time, calling itself copycat has a little bit more to do than just that. I love this movie. Absolutely love it. I don't see a lot of people talk about it on horror channels, I think for kind of obvious reasons. But once again, at the end of the day, this is a film about a serial killer copycatting other famous serial killers and them having to use one of these said famous serial killers to catch that serial killer. So yeah, it's very much in the vein of Silence of the Lambs, but I don't feel like they really run too headfirst into that. They really do feel like they make it their own, and I thought it was just so well done. I struggled between this and the movie that I ended up picking for the best of 95, but this one definitely deserves an honorable mention. I think, maybe a few points in my brain swayed the other way. This one would have came out on top. So yeah, if you have not seen Copycat, I'm going to give this recommendation to you of the highest order, folks. So if that's an honorable mention, what's the best movie of 1995 for the horror genre? IMO. It's got to be Seven. And this is another one that people really give you the argument of this not being horror. But this is about a man murdering people using the 7 deadly sins as inspiration. Meanwhile, your two cops here, Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman, are hot on his trail. This is one of the best films of the 90s, in my opinion. Not just horror, not just this year. The whole decade, all of cinema, this is one of the best movies of that decade. I absolutely love it. And I'm not usually a real big fan of Brad Pitt's work, but this one, holy shit, did he do a standout job. Morgan Freeman seldom ever misses, and he doesn't here as well. Just good stuff. Even, knowing what we know about Kevin Spacey, I'll still say really enjoyed his performance here in this movie as John Doe as well. Really effective antagonist. And for my money, best horror picture of 1995. Whether you want to call it horror or not, at the end of the day, like I said, this is a horror flick. So yeah, you haven't seen this one, you are missing out. Let's go ahead and move on, folks, to 1996, and we're going to talk about some honorable mentions here. I got to start with The Craft. This is one that I honestly, watching as a kid, didn't really think I would be into. And wow, was I wrong. And it would actually give me a little bit of forethought to the future on what was really going to pull me into the horror genre here with Neve Campbell and Skeet Ulrich being a part of this film, as we'll see here very soon, the same year, actually. So yeah, The Craft is a really good movie. Fairuza Balk, Nev Campbell, they do fantastic job in this film. Really like it. I mean, it's good to see like a horror film, especially around this age, that is, you know, kind of geared towards girls. And I thought they did a really good job with it. Fantastic stuff here. Go check it out if you haven't already. There's a sequel. There's a sequel that came out, last year? And the less said about that one, the better. Let's move on. More honorable mentions. We've got From Dusk Till Dawn, one of my favorite vampire movies of the modern age. George Clooney, Quentin Tarantino here in this one. Of course, directed by Robert Rodriguez. Just good stuff, man. Selma Hayek is amazing in this one. You know, you've got cameos galore in this one. Tom Savini's even in this film with his dick gun. It's bananas, but it's fantastic. It is. It's a good time, and it's a good movie. So definitely, if you haven't seen this one, check it out. There are a couple of sequels. They're neither really here nor there. This one is really where it's all about. Check it out. As far as 1996 goes, this is one of the best, but it's not the best. That, my friends, goes to one of my favorite films of all time. Not just from the 90s, not just from this genre, one of my favorite films of all time. This is 1996's Scream. Of course, directed by Wes Craven, starring Nev Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette. Good stuff through and through. It's an amazing whodunit. It's an amazing slasher film. Very postmodern, meta, self-aware. Kind of started that whole trend, bringing to fruition kind of what Wes Craven's New Nightmare laid down with that groundwork. You know, I'm sure most people that watch this channel have seen this movie, but there are fewer things in this world that give me more joy than sitting down with someone who's never seen Scream and watching it with them, and more so watching their reaction than watching the film itself. That's how much I love this movie. It's once again, wow, chef's kiss, fan-fucking-tastic. You know, as much as I enjoy The Craft and From Dusk Till Dawn, there's no doubt they're honorable mentions and pale in comparison when it comes to this film. This is definitely the best film of 1996, in my opinion. Horror or not, fuck yourself. This movie's amazing. It comes with the highest of recommendations if you haven't seen it. And if you have, revisit it. It's a great film to revisit. So here we are moving into 1997. Let's go ahead and check out some honorable mentions for that year. You got to talk about Cube, a Canadian horror film that, in my estimation, was Saw before Saw. Now, granted, it's not 100% like, you know, Saw ripped this film off or anything, but like the stuff that people are calling like, you know, these traps and the quote unquote torture porn. This is that Saw Hostel feel before the Saw and Hostel feel. I mean, this is 1997. You didn't start seeing that stuff until 2004 or 5. So I think it was ahead of its time, a Canadian production. Really enjoyed this film. I have never seen any of the sequels, so I can't say much about them, but I will say this original one is definitely one to revisit if you have already seen it. And if you haven't, strap yourselves in. Damn good time. So another honorable mention here is 1997's I Know What You Did Last Summer. Now, they took a lot of liberties with the source material on this one, but in any event, I really appreciate this film. I know what it is. It is cashing in on the success of Scream. And, you know, as you can see at the top, even Kevin Williamson wrote this thing. And I like the quote at the bottom, more laughs and chills than Scream. Well, that's a lie, but I appreciate the effort. It's a really good movie. It is. Like I said, they took some liberties with the source material, but it's cashing in on Scream being a success. But I think of all the Scream copycats, this one's probably the best. So yeah, definitely worth a look if by some chance you missed this one. And that brings us to the only movie that it and its sequel have been number one on my list thus far. Now, granted, I've only made the 80s and we're doing the 90s right now, but my pick for the best film of 1997 is Scream 2. So that's 2 years in a row I had to go with a Scream film being the best of that year. Man, I got to tell you, I talked at the early part of this video about Child's Play 2 being a really good example of a sequel and even being better than its original. Now, I won't say that Scream 2 is better than Scream 1. I won't say that. I don't feel like that's the case. But holy shit, is it close. This is, without a doubt, one of, if not the best horror sequel of all time. I'm talking about it's up there with Child's Play 2. It's up there with Nightmare 2, Friday 2. It's up there in the upper echelon of horror or slasher sequels that get such a bad name that this one and those like it, some of the ones I mentioned, I'm really glad to have them around to kind of put that notion to rest. This film even tackles the whole sequels suck argument. So it's, once again, very meta, very on the nose, just really good stuff. And I feel like there's no competition here. This is the best film of 1997 in that genre. So let's move on to 1998 here. And we're going to give a honorable mention to The Last Broadcast. Now, this is one that I see a lot of people talk about within the horror community. You do see it from time to time. I'm sure there are a lot of people that probably have missed this one. But on the whole, just general moviegoers, I don't see many people talk about this one at all. This was Blair Witch before the Blair Witch. This was, it definitely didn't beat Cannibal Holocaust to the whole found footage thing. But a year before, in 1998, searching for the Jersey Devil, you have some folks go missing. I think, you know what? It's a little corny, a little campy, like some of the movies in this list, in the 80s list, have been. But it's a really good movie as far as the creepiness of it. So that's why I kind of figured, hey, look, this thing ain't the Blair Witch Project. It ain't that good. But I think as far as found footage goes, they did it first, and they did it very effectively. So this is one I figure a lot of people probably have not seen. So yeah, recommendations. Go check this one out as well. I think it's a pretty good time. Pretty creepy film. Up next is Bride of Chucky, and I think thus far every Child's Play movie has made it onto each year as an honorable mention or as the film of that year. So considering that probably won't happen going forward with Seed, good on you, Chucky. You're 4 for 4 here at this point, man. Good stuff. So Bride of Chucky, obviously a play on the old Universal films like Bride of Frankenstein, which was a fantastic movie. This one's very good. I appreciate it. It's the first one outside of that Child's Play trilogy. They're going to go in a different direction, a little bit more comedy in this one than what you're used to in the first three. But I feel like this one does a good job of balancing that out, whereas Seed, that follows this, really doesn't. I like the new character of Tiffany. I like the new design and look of Chucky. I like the story. Would have loved to have seen Andy's character in this one. But we do get that back a little bit on down the road. Bride of Chucky's a good flick. It's a good time. Check it out. And yeah, let's move on here to another honorable mention from 1998, and that is going to be Halloween H2O. I know the Halloween community is very split when it comes to this film. There's a portion of the Halloween community that thinks that this is awful garbage, and they have good reasons. And then there's a part of the Halloween community that thinks this is the best Halloween film since Halloween 4, this being the 7th entry. And I think they're right, too. Look, hey, at the end of the day, there's some problems, especially with Michael's mask in this movie. I think with the guy who plays Michael, Chris Durand, who didn't really have much of an idea of what this character was and what he was getting his hands into. But at the end of the day, I think overall, this is the best Halloween film since Halloween 4. I think it was a really good idea considering where they were at in the franchise to kind of do a reboot, kind of retcon some things. They kind of painted themselves into a corner. So yeah, I enjoy this Halloween. It's one of, I definitely put it in the top of the franchise, in the upper half of the franchise. And I think it's a good time. Despite some flaws, I'll definitely put it into the honorable mentions for 1998, but it is not the best horror movie of 1998. That one, my friends, goes to The Faculty. And once again, Kevin Williamson is just reigning supreme in the late 90s for horror. I mean, 96 Scream, 97 Scream 2, 98 The Faculty. These are all Kevin Williamson inspired films. And this one's my favorite one of 1998. Josh Hartnett does a fantastic job in this one. You've got Usher in this film. You've just got a really good ensemble cast. And, that's kind of something that I think Kevin Williamson, a lot of his movies were good for, was putting together these ensemble casts of really talented actors and actresses. Now, I've always felt like The Faculty was meant to be to sci-fi movies what Scream was to the slasher film or the horror film in general. And I felt like they did that fantastically. I felt like they did that very effectively. But this movie doesn't quite get the glory that Scream does. And whereas I don't feel it's as good as Scream, I feel like it probably should be a little bit more of a bigger name when it comes to sci-fi and horror films. And for me, there's no better movie in the year of 1998 than The Faculty. So yeah, it's hard for me to say with this one. I'm sure a lot of people probably haven't seen this one. Maybe they were born after it came out. Maybe they skipped it. Any event, if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. I feel pretty confident you won't be disappointed in this one. So we move on to the very last year here of the 90s, 1999, and we're, of course, going to talk about some honorable mentions here. I've only got 2 honorable mentions for this year, and then we're going to close out on the big movie of the year in 1999. Of course, Idle Hands, Devon Sawa, I guess, more of a comedy horror here. Very well done. And when this thing came out, I was a huge Offspring fan. I still kind of am to this day. But this movie, like 90% of the soundtrack is the Offspring. So they really reeled me in with this one. I thought it was very well done. Jessica Alba looking good in this one. Like I said, Devon Sawa doing a fantastic job. Seth Green, just really good. Another good ensemble cast put together here. Fantastic stuff. If you're looking for a scare and a good time, maybe a laugh, I'd check it out. Most definitely. I feel like this one's very underrated. And here is my other honorable mention for the year 1999. This one coming to us by Takashi Mike is Audition. And holy fuck. Grab a barf bag if you're going to watch this one. If you're squeamish, if you don't do very well with gross things like vomit, needles, piano wire, cutting into people, I'll say this, proceed with caution, but holy shit, this is an insane flick. Insane. And I adore it. I really do. Yeah, it's a little much to stomach sometimes, but it's worth it. Insane movie. I feel like there are probably some people, given that this is an import, have not seen this, and that's why I give the warning, proceed with caution, but I would do it. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but yeah. All right, folks, so let's go ahead and dive into the year 1999, my favorite horror film for 1999, The Blair Witch Project. I don't know what to tell you guys. At the end of the day, I know there's a lot of people that hate this movie. They detest it. They say it's pointless, it's worthless, whatever. I am of the opinion that sometimes less is more. And that sometimes is the Blair Witch Project. You never see a witch. You never see an antagonist. You kind of hear things. Maybe you see something here and there that out of the corner of your eye, so to speak, or in a camera movement. You're not really too sure. And that's what's so effective about this movie is it feels real. These really feel like people that I knew in the 90s. This really feels like a situation that I think could have occurred. And given the fact that they don't try to give you some CG or, guy in a suit monster at the end of it, I kind of appreciate that more. I think this movie took the last broadcast and improved upon it. And I feel like this movie had such an incredible promotional campaign in a very budding early days of the internet. and it's just really good. It's one of those movies that I'm not going to sit here and say that everyone that watches this thing on my recommendation that hasn't seen it is going to love it. I'm sure it'll be split even then. Some people are going to hate it. Some people are going to hate get motion sickness from watching this thing. Some people are going to hate it doesn't show much. But some people, I think, will really appreciate this movie for what it is. Every single time the credits roll on this film and that quasi score, whatever it is, type music plays in the background, I get goosebumps. It's chilling. It's honestly chilling. And without a doubt, my opinion, bear that in mind, IMO, the absolute best horror film of 1999. I love it and watch it in season and out of season to this very day. Absolutely love it. So there it is, folks. I did this one a little bit faster. Instead of 40-something minutes, I'm finishing this one right now at about 35, 36 minutes. I don't know how much it would cut down in post, but there it is. My picks year by year with honorable mentions, best horror of the 90s. So it's that time of the year. It's spooky season. Maybe something on this list you saw you haven't seen before that looks interesting. Maybe you saw something you'd like to revisit. Whatever the case may be, if I helped, I'm glad I did. And yeah, let me know down in the comment section below. What are your picks for the best horror films of the 90s? And what do you think about my picks? With that said, it's time to go get watching some spooky stuff, folks. I'm Bren from Bloody Breakdown, and we'll catch you all next time.